I'm Claire Bennett. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my adult life, my calendar has owned me. 70-hour weeks were normal. 80-hour weeks didn't even register as extreme. I worked in tech consulting in Seattle, the kind of job where airports feel like hallways and hotel rooms blur together. I ate dinners out of cardboard containers, took calls with one shoe off in airport bathrooms, and learned how to sound calm while my body quietly begged me to stop. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was building towards something. After my father died, my mother, Marilyn Bennett, changed in ways I didn't fully understand. She became sharper, more decisive, more convinced she knew what was best for everyone. I responded the only way I knew how, by working harder. If I stayed busy enough, I didn't have to fall apart. At the beginning of 2025, I finally got promoted, not the kind of promotion that comes with balloons or applause, just a silent acknowledgement that I'd survived long enough to be trusted. A few months later, I signed the papers on a house, a mountain house in Asheville, North Carolina, tucked into the Blue Ridge Mountains. It wasn't flashy. It was solid. Wide windows, a long porch, pine trees standing close enough to feel like privacy. The first time I walked through it, something inside me loosened without asking permission. My shoulders dropped, my breath slowed. This was mine. No roommates, no compromises, no one telling me where I should sleep or how much space I was allowed to take up. I bought it with my own money, earned hour by hour, year by year. I didn't buy it as an investment. I bought it as a lifeline. The day I moved in, the air was cold and clean. The house smelled like fresh wood and quiet. I dragged my suitcase into the living room and just stood there for a moment, surrounded by unopened boxes, sunlight spilling across the floor like it had been waiting for me. Then my phone rang. Mom! My stomach tightened before I answered. She didn't ask how the drive was. She didn't say congratulations. She didn't comment on the house or ask if I was settled in. Her voice came through flat and efficient, like she was reading instructions off a list. You'll need to move your things up to the attic, she said. I blinked. What? The whole family is coming, she continued. They'll need the bedrooms. For a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard her. I asked her to repeat herself. She did. Slower this time, sharper. This isn't a discussion, Claire. Family comes first. I felt the words stack up in my chest, heavy and unmoving. I told her this was my house, or at least I tried to. The sentence never made it out of my mouth. Her tone dropped, final and cold. Hey, if you refuse to welcome us, she said, don't bother calling yourself part of this family anymore. The line went dead. I stood there holding my phone, staring at the far wall as if it might explain what had just happened. The house, which had felt warm and alive minutes earlier, went eerily quiet. I could hear the soft ticking of the clock I'd hung that afternoon. Somewhere outside, wind moved through the trees. I lowered myself onto the edge of the couch and sat there, unmoving. This was supposed to be my first night of rest. I'd imagined wine on the coffee table, a blanket pulled up to my chin, windows open to the mountain air. I'd imagined sleeping deeply for the first time in years. Instead, I replayed my mother's words over and over, each one landing harder than the last. She hadn't asked, she hadn't suggested, she had decided. In her mind, this house wasn't my sanctuary. It was a resource, a space she could claim, divide, and assign. And my needs, once again, hadn't factored into the equation at all. What shocked me most wasn't the demand. It was how familiar it felt. I'd spent my entire life being the one who adjusted, the one who made room, the one who stayed quiet to keep the peace. And standing there in my own living room, I realized something unsettling. My mother hadn't just crossed a boundary. She'd assumed it didn't exist. And in that moment, as the house seemed to hold its breath around me, I understood that this was only the beginning. I didn't explode. That surprised me most of all. There was no shouting, no shaking hands, no rush of anger. What settled over me instead was a strange, polished calm. The kind I'd learned in high-pressure boardrooms when someone tried to corner me, and I had exactly one chance not to lose control. I walked through the house slowly, touching things as I went. The banister on the stairs, the edge of the kitchen counter, the back of a chair I hadn't even sat in yet. I needed to remind myself that this place was real, that it belonged to me. But I also understood something with uncomfortable clarity. My mother hadn't called to ask. she'd called to inform. Upstairs, the attic waited. Low ceiling, bare wood, one narrow window. A space meant for storage, not living. She'd told me to move there as if it were generous, reasonable, as if my presence in my own home was an inconvenience she was kindly helping me work around. Standing at the bottom of the attic stairs, old memories surfaced without warning. When I was 16 and she told me to give up my bedroom to visiting relatives because you're adaptable. When I was praised for being mature every time I made myself smaller. When I learned that compliance was called kindness and resistance was labeled selfishness. I'd been trained well. I didn't call her back. Instead, I made coffee. The machine hissed and gurgled, filling the kitchen with a sound that grounded me. I carried my mug out to the porch and sat down, pulling my sweater tighter as the mountain air brushed my skin. Clouds drifted slowly over the Blue Ridge, unbothered by family drama or ultimatums. I focused on my breathing, in, out. Then I made a decision. I would move my things, not because she was right, not because I agreed, but because time was leverage, and I needed it. I packed deliberately, each shirt folded flat, each sweater stacked neatly. It felt almost ceremonial, like I was putting order around a situation that refused to be honest. With every trip upstairs, I paid attention to my body, the tightness in my shoulders, the flicker of anger that rose and fell, the quiet clarity that came when I reminded myself why I was doing this. I wasn't surrendering my space. I was watching. By mid-morning, my phone buzzed. One message from my mother. Good. Nothing else. A second message followed minutes later. They'll be there today. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. There was a familiar urge to explain, to clarify that this wasn't about choosing myself over family, that it was about respect. That urge had shaped most of my life, and every time I'd given into it, my words had been twisted into proof that I was overreacting. So I didn't reply. That silence wasn't passive, it was intentional. I spent the next hour making the house look neutral. I cleared the kitchen counters. I slid personal items into drawers. I lifted framed photos off shelves and set them aside carefully, as if they were fragile, which they were, just not in the way my family would understand. I wasn't hiding who I was. I wanted to see what would happen when the space stopped reminding them that I existed. As I worked, my father drifted into my thoughts, the way he used to stand quietly in the kitchen, watching without interrupting. He once told me that people reveal themselves fastest when they think the outcome is already decided. At the time, I hadn't understood what he meant. Now, I did. Around noon, the sound of tires crunching on gravel reached the porch. Then laughter, then voices, confident, relaxed, familiar. I didn't rush downstairs. From where I stood, I could hear someone admiring the view, someone joking about who would get which room. My mother's voice carried clearly, warm, assured, like she was welcoming guests into a place that belonged to her. The front door opened. Bags hit the floor, drawers slid open, shoes were kicked off without anyone asking where they should go. I stayed still, my heart beating harder than I expected. This was the moment when every instinct in me wanted to intervene, to step forward, to remind them whose house this was. I didn't. Because if there was one thing I'd learned in all those conference rooms, it was this. When people believe you've accepted your place, they stop pretending. And I was done being surprised by who my family really was. The sound of tires crunching on gravel pulled me out of my thoughts. One car, then another, then more than I'd expected. The front door swung open, and laughter rushed in like a wave, loud and careless. I stayed where I was, standing at the base of the staircase, watching as if I were observing a scene I hadn't been invited to join. My mother, Marilyn, stepped inside first. She moved through the living room with easy confidence, smiling, gesturing, introducing the house to everyone as if it were hers. She talked about the view, the porch, the light in the afternoons. People nodded, impressed, already settling in. Suitcases rolled across the hardwood. Shoes were kicked off near the door. Someone leaned a bag against the wall without asking. Another voice called out, "Which room is mine?" No one looked at me. Aunt Tanya took charge immediately, pointing down the hallway, assigning rooms like she was organizing a retreat. Uncle Rick followed behind her, cracking jokes, laughing loudly, turning the takeover into something casual and harmless. "Plenty of space," he said. "This place is perfect." Perfect for them. No one asked me where I wanted to sleep. No one asked if I needed help. No one asked permission to move anything. Then I saw her. The woman standing just to the right of my mother, close enough that their shoulders brushed when they laughed. Diane Cole. I hadn't been properly introduced. No explanation, no context. Just her name tossed out quickly, as if I should already know it. She was casually dressed, nothing flashy, but everything about her suggested comfort. Ownership. She walked into the largest bedroom without hesitation, ran her hand along the dresser, commented on the light. She asked about water pressure, internet speed, where extra linens were kept. My mother answered every question instantly, without turning to me once. Diane drifted into the kitchen next, opening cabinets like she already knew what was inside. She squinted at the overhead lights and said they were too bright, that they could adjust it later. My mother laughed softly in agreement. The tightness in my chest had nothing to do with the house anymore. It was the ease between them. This didn't feel new, it felt practiced. The claiming escalated quickly. A stack of my books on the coffee table was lifted and set aside. My throw blanket was folded neatly and placed on a chair. Someone unplugged a lamp and carried it down the hall. Boxes with my handwriting on them were picked up and moved toward the garage to keep things tidy. Just like that, pieces of my life began disappearing. I followed the trail out back and stood in the garage, staring at the growing piles. A box of letters from my father. A few personal keepsakes I hadn't unpacked yet. Things that mattered to me, stacked against the wall like excess inventory. Inside the house, laughter floated through the open door. I stood there longer than I should have, my hands curled into fists at my sides, grounding myself. This was what silence cost. This was what happened when people mistook restraint for surrender. When I stepped back inside, I caught sight of my mother walking past Diane, her hand resting briefly on Diane's back. The gesture was small, familiar, intimate. My stomach dropped. That was the moment it clicked. Everyone knew. They had known Diane long before today, long before this house, long before I'd been kept busy, grieving, working myself into exhaustion. I was the only one being introduced now because I was the only one who hadn't already been let in. The realization didn't explode inside me. It settled. Heavy. Cold. Precise. I moved through the rooms unnoticed, watching my space transform. Furniture shifted. Drawers opened. My presence shrank to whatever couldn't be easily relocated. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror and barely recognized myself. Shoulders hunched, expression flat, already being written out of the story. By the time evening crept in, I found myself back in the garage, sitting on one of the boxes, the cool concrete pressing through my clothes. From inside, someone called out about drinks. Someone else laughed too loudly. I stayed where I was. Because standing there among the pieces of my boxed-up life, one thing became painfully clear. They weren't acting like guests. They were acting like owners. And I was being erased in real time. The next morning, I woke to the sound of cabinets opening and closing. Diane was already in the kitchen. She moved through the space with the ease of someone who had done it 100 times, reaching for mugs without looking, pulling out utensils from the correct drawer, starting the coffee maker like she knew exactly how long it took to warm up. No hesitation, no searching. My mother sat at the table scrolling on her phone, nodding along as Diane spoke. When Diane handed her a cup of coffee, my mother thanked her softly without looking up. It was ordinary. That was what made it unbearable. As more people drifted in, I caught fragments of conversation that slid under my skin like splinters. I'm just glad Marilyn's finally happy. Diane was there for her when Bennett was really sick. She held everything together back then. I stood at the counter, my hands flat against the cool stone, and felt something inside me tighten. I turned around. How long? I asked. The kitchen went quiet in a way that felt deliberate. Aunt Tanya avoided my eyes. Uncle Rick cleared his throat and stared at the floor. Someone pretended to check their phone. How long has Diane been in Mom's life? I repeated. The pause stretched. Then Tanya spoke carefully. A while, she said. It started when your dad was still alive. Everyone thought it was best not to overwhelm you at the time. Not overwhelm me. The words hit with surgical precision. They had sat beside me at my father's funeral. They had hugged me while I cried. They had told me how strong I was, how proud he would be of me. And all the while, they had been carrying this truth, passing it quietly between them, deciding what I could and couldn't handle, to protect my mother's comfort. The pain didn't explode. It collapsed. Slowly, completely. Everything snapped into focus then. The way Diane moved through my house, the way my mother deferred to her, the confidence with which everyone else treated my space as negotiable. This wasn't a sudden takeover. It was the continuation of an old pattern. They decided for me what I would know, what I would accept, what I would sacrifice in the name of being understanding. Later that afternoon, the conversation shifted, casually at first. This place would be perfect for a ceremony. The porch would look amazing with flowers. We could host everyone for the whole week. My mother smiled. Diane leaned closer to her. Someone laughed about how lucky they were that I had such a big house. Our house, Diane said. She used the word without hesitation. They talked about guest lists, about catering, about dates. Someone mentioned they might need more rooms and suggested I could stay in the attic for a bit longer. My mother nodded, already agreeing. They weren't asking, they were testing, and this time I didn't react. I listened. That night, after the house finally quieted, I climbed back up to the attic and opened my laptop. The small desk creaked under my weight. The room smelled faintly of dust and pine. I started reading county regulations, noise ordinances, parking limits, permit requirements for private events, liability clauses. The language was dry, precise, unforgiving. Large gatherings required permits. Weddings were not considered small gatherings. Responsibility fell on the event organizers and anyone who authorized use of the property. I saved everything. Downstairs, planning accelerated. Vendors were called. Promises were made. I heard my name used casually, like a stamp of approval. Claire's fine with it. Her place can handle it. She won't mind. No one asked me. I noticed how Diane avoided eye contact whenever money came up, how Aunt Tanya spoke louder when mentioning logistics, as if volume could turn assumption into fact. How Uncle Rick brushed off concerns with jokes. They believed I would step in if things got complicated. They believed I always would. That's when I called Noah. I told him everything, not emotionally, just facts. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a brief silence on the line. "Don't save them from their own decisions," he said finally. The words settled deep in my chest. "Boundaries aren't arguments," he added. "They're actions." When I hung up, I sat on the porch and watched the mountains fade into dusk. The air was cool, steady, indifferent to human entitlement. Inside, they were building a fantasy on my silence. And for the first time, I understood exactly how dangerous that silence was. For them, not for me. The day before the wedding, the house exploded into chaos. Fabric rolls leaned against the walls. Boxes of candles crowded the hallway. Rental chairs stacked on the porch. A handwritten schedule taped to the fridge read, "All set up complete by 10 a.m." My mother and Diane moved through it all like everything already belonged to them. Confident, purposeful, unquestioning. At 8:40 a.m., the catering truck pulled up. A woman with short gray hair stepped out, clipboard tucked under her arm. Janice Hale looked like someone who had handled hundreds of weddings and had no patience left for assumptions. Diane rushed toward her, talking fast, issuing directions, pointing at the porch. Janice smiled politely, but didn't move. "Before we unload," she said, calm and professional, "I'll need confirmation from the homeowner and the event permit." Diane waved a hand. "Oh, that's all taken care of." Janice's eyes shifted to me. "Are you the homeowner?" "Yes," I said. "I own the house." Diane relaxed, already turning back to the truck. Janice didn't follow. She looked at me again. "And you've signed the authorization for this event?" Diane answered for me. "She has." I looked at Diane for a long second. Then I turned back to Janice. "I haven't signed anything. I never approved a wedding here." The air changed instantly. Janice flipped through her papers. The signature line was blank. She closed the folder. "Without written authorization, we can't unload. It's a liability issue." Diane laughed, too loud. "This is just a misunderstanding. Go ahead and set up. We'll fix the paperwork later." Janice shook her head. "I can't do that." She stepped aside and made a call. Another vendor arrived and was stopped. Then another. Early guests began gathering on the porch, whispering. Diane's smile cracked. She turned on me. "You changed your mind at the last minute," she accused. I kept my voice steady. I never agreed. I was never asked. A county vehicle pulled in. An officer confirmed what Janice already knew. No permit, no homeowner approval, no event. The trucks backed away. Equipment was reloaded. The wedding collapsed in real time, in front of everyone. The silence afterward was thick enough to hear metal clink as gear was stowed away. Then the explosion came. Aunt Tanya cried that I'd ruined my mother's happiness. Uncle Rick yelled that I'd embarrassed the family. Diane screamed that I was selfish and cruel. My mother looked at me like I had betrayed her. For the first time, I didn't shrink. "This is my house," I said. "I worked 80-hour weeks to buy it. I bought it to heal after losing Dad. No one gets to take it and demand my gratitude." I listed everything. Being forced into the attic, rooms assigned without asking. My belongings moved to the garage. My name used as permission. The truth about Diane hidden from me while my father was still alive. "You're not angry about the wedding," I finished. "You're angry because you lost control." I gave them 30 minutes to leave, including my mother. They stared at me like they didn't recognize who I was. But I didn't move. Suitcases rolled, doors slammed, tires crunched down the mountain road. When the last car disappeared around the bend, the house exhaled. I walked room to room, bringing my life back inside. Books returned to shelves, blankets draped where they belonged. In the closet, behind a stack of towels, I found my father's framed photo. My hands shook as I placed it on my nightstand. I opened the windows and let the mountain air rush in. That night, I slept in my own bed. Not the attic. The lesson was simple and hard-earned. Boundaries aren't revenge. They're self-rescue. Family doesn't require you to trade peace for loyalty. Silence isn't always patience. Sometimes it's how you see who treats you like a resource. If you listen to this story from beginning to end, tell me, did it resonate with you? What kinds of stories should I share next? If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to hear more women tell their stories.